Welcome to Great Northern Cascade Division and N Scale. My name's Ian and I've been making some progress getting started on Interbay Yard here. Gonna scoot out the way a little bit. I've got all of the plywood subroad bed coming around this end peninsula from the Seattle stations all the way down the side here. 24 some feet down for what will be Interbay Yard. So I'm pretty much all the way down to the corner here where Salmon Bay Bridge will start to sneak in. So all of it's raised up 2 inches, kind of like I did on the other side for the Seattle stations. Pretty much all of the scenery here on all 3 decks eventually is following this idea of a raised subroad bed, either plywood or 2-inch foam insulation. And it's really so that when I have the scenic areas, I can drop the scene away, I can move scene away. I don't have a whole bunch of heavy plywood where I don't need it if it's just going to be covered with scenery and stuff like that. The stations and the yards, ironically, the stuff that I've been doing so far, are pretty much all just big flat areas. So this is just a whole bunch of plywood empire that's running down here for now. But once we get through towards Salmon Bay Bridge, once we start coming up this other side here, running along the Puget Sound up towards Everett and then across to Snohomish, then hopefully that subroad bed approach starts to make a little bit more sense. We'll see how that goes. It worked okay when we were doing the return loop because we could kind of carve in and show the South Puget Sound area where the trains would be running along the water. So I'm excited to start to get some of that. But in this video, let's have a little look as I start to come around the peninsula and then run all the way down for this big long section for Interbay Yard. Now at the point where I'll be able to start actually getting some track down. I'm going to start with the main line tracks before I actually start getting into the yard itself, because that's just so many turnouts and so much wiring. So please do like, subscribe, follow along, hit the notification bell so you can see more as I make progress on Interbay Yard. Thanks for watching this one. Talk to you soon. This is the first cut of the curved section as we come around the end of this center peninsula, and like I've mentioned on previous videos, extended it out by about 6 inches, right on 6 inches, which I always knew I would probably need to extend this out. So underneath just added some more cross pieces to kind of come across, because it's not going to have a lot of weight on the end here, but most of my framework was done with this nominally 1/2 inch 4-ply plywood ripped and then 1x3 strips of the cross pieces. I had a piece of 1x3 hanging out down here and I couldn't be bothered to go and rip the part of the 1/2 inch ply, but I also wanted to have this there because there is going to be a little bit more weight. This plywood is a little bit heavy, and there are going to be some of the structures that start to come over here, so I needed to make sure that there was a little bit more support on here than maybe I would have done otherwise. Once the fascia is on, it will come down in a smooth join rather than just kind of notch there, because I couldn't be bothered to angle the end of that 1x3. But that is kind of the hardest part done, getting the curve around here, running down, joining in with 18-inch deep bench work, and then I've got 2 lengths of 18-inch wide, 8-foot lengths to come pretty much all the way down to where it would then become the scenic part as we would then move over towards Salmon Bay Bridge. That's probably going to end up being 2-inch pink foam anyway, so that was actually pretty good stopping point. It means it's 24 feet of plywood, and so the tracks are going to be set 3 inches back probably, and then with track separation we'll probably come back to about 5 inches. So the whole Interbay Yard itself is basically going to cover pretty much everything that's here on plywood. By the end of the plywood section, we'll come back down to 2 main lines that are going to come around the front here, and they'll run along the front of the benchwork all the way down, and then Interbay Yard is going to be set back from those main lines. Idea being that you could still have passenger trains running up and down, or if you're having freight bypass Interbay Yard for whatever reason, you're not kind of obstructing the view of those trains go by, and then the yard work can be going on behind that. Also didn't want to have a whole bunch of switching going on at the front of the bench work, and then the passenger trains or bypass trains, whatever, going on the back. That seemed a little bit odd to me as well. So passenger trains or the through freight will be kind of front and center, and then the yard just behind that. So next step is to cut a whole bunch of risers, the same way that I had done over here for the Seattle stations area. This is functionally what we're going to be doing, raised up so that the baseboard here, subroad, is going to start at 2 inches raised up, so that when you have pink foam and stuff like that, it lines up just right. So got a whole bunch of little strips to cut now, and then we can start raising this up, getting it all leveled. Probably is getting the height coming around here. I might actually look and see if I've got enough of the pink foam or plywood that I can kind of cut that section in to make sure that we've got the right height there and it stays level as we come around to here. Bench work is fairly level, but again, one of the other advantages of kind of doing this raised road bed here, even though it's big sheets, is that you can make sure that this ends up perfectly level, even if the bench work underneath maybe isn't perfectly so. If we look off in the distance, there's a little dip just there. Don't care so much, because that'll be taken out of consideration by the time we would have the 2-inch foam, or we would have this plywood raised up. So cutting a whole bunch of strips, seeing I've got enough to come in here, and then we'll come back and have a look once we've started. I got this raised up. This is that main section as we come around the peninsula where most of the facilities are going to be in place. It's all raised up on these little 1x3-inch blocks, as you can see right the way along, on all the cross pieces of the actual framework, raised up by about 2 inches. It is 2 inches, and then just leveled it along. So I think what I'm probably going to do now, before I go down the rest of the way, is look at trying to get the section in here, just to make sure that, even though when I had put a level across it, it looked like it should be fine, we are talking something that's 4 feet away and about 2 feet over. So I need to figure out what I'm going to put in here for the track that'll run through the tunnel under downtown Seattle, and then I can just kind of plow down with those other 2 sections, 8-foot long sections for the rest of Interbay Yard. So let's try and figure out this section here that will come around from the station, and then come back and check that out. Now that extension all the way from the Seattle stations, running out to be the area through the tunnel under downtown Seattle. Very slight uphill grade, and I think it was more the bench work than anything else, but it's the way it goes. So it's about 0.3 degrees on my little electric doohickey, when that's with a 0.1 degree of accuracy. So I'm okay with that. If there is a slight grade coming up through the hill, through the tunnel, so you come out the tunnel around about here, and then you've got that whole section all the way down. But otherwise, everything is level. So ignore the bench work. That's partly why going with this raised road bed approach is, as long as the bench work is solid, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. And again, most of it was within 0.2, 0.3 degrees, 0.2 degrees with a 0.0 degree of accuracy. And so by the time you then get that sub-road bed on, that works out pretty good. So I didn't want to kind of have a whole bunch of heavy plywood in all of that section, because most of it's going to be covered. Again, there's going to be kind of a hill coming down through the tunnels area, and then some buildings built up, again, just because of the height of the actual deck. Not going to be able to show super high buildings, but mid-50s, there wouldn't have been a lot of super tall buildings in downtown Seattle anyway, so I can kind of get away with it and give a representation of what it would be as you would then swing into Interbay Yard. So same process that I'd used over on the Seattle stations, where we have the joins underneath. There are strips about 4 inches wide that run through. Wood glue on that, screw them down, and then use this sure foam rasp to then go through and just kind of sand it down. So I need to sand over the top of everything else. I'm going to wait until I've got the other 2 lengths done before I do that. But otherwise, those joint plates are glued, they are screwed in, they are then sanded down, and here's the other plate that's resting here. And so the idea is that when I start doing the next section, you just kind of lift the plywood section up, and then it will be ready to go. So let's get these 2 lengths done, and then we'll come back and look at it when it's finished. So all 24 some feet now of this plywood sub-road bed is now all done. It's all raised up, it is all level, it's all right at 2 inches. Ignore what looks like an optical illusion down here. Like I said before, the benchwork does ever so slightly dip away. Actually kind of more bends down here just because of the bend of some of the wood, and just because of sloppiness probably when I was putting it together, but never really concerned me much because I knew that with this res subroad bed that was going to level itself out. So this is now what will be Interbay Yard eventually. It'll take a while. Might need to still have a little bit more that comes out. The two main lines are going to run along the front of all this baseboard. They'll then start to bend up, probably about here. They'll start to bend back towards the middle, and then all the lines will be funneling together from Interbay Yard. And so I need to double check the track plan as to exactly where all of those come together. It's somewhere around here, I think. So not sure if I'm going to stick and get another plywood section to kind of come around, but then kind of narrow it together so that I can have some scenic stuff, because Salmon Bay Bridge is coming in right around here. Fairly wide bridge in end scale 14 inches, maybe, something like that, maybe a little bit more. There's two bastille bridges, which I think are about 6.5 inches, 7 inches a piece, and then there's probably another couple of inches on kind of just a, I don't know, almost like a raised level. Doesn't really have any trestle work around it or any framework around it, so I think the bridge would probably start somewhere right around here, and it wouldn't quite take up that whole span, but yeah, I think I need to have a little bit something to come down here if I'm going to be able to bring those mainline tracks through together. But for now, I think I'm going to end this one. Still does need sanding. That's fairly easy to do. It's kind of late and I don't want to make a bunch of noise and a bunch of mess right now. But all the sections are joined like we had on that previous clip, glued together, and then both screwed together, and then went over it with that sure foam rasp, so it is very, very smooth going between there. But yeah, so I'll hit everything with random orbital sander just to kind of smooth it all down. It's a lot smoother than it was on the other side. I paid a lot more attention when I was picking out the sheets of plywood than I did on the Seattle station, so there's no undulations in the wood here. I'm not having to try and sand a whole bunch out. I shouldn't then be having to try and raise any of the track a little bit on little spaces like I had done on the Seattle stations, which turned out fine, and when it's ballasted won't be a problem. But over here everything's already pretty smooth, pretty well put together, so I'll hit all this with a sander, and then probably going to start figuring out in the next video bringing these tracks down, extending the tracks that come out of King Street Station and Union Station. Look at starting to expand that foam subroad bed, bring them together through the tunnel, sweep them around, and then start to put in, I think there's going to be 3 turnouts over here on what's essentially the south side of the yard. I think there's one crossover that will bring the track from Union Station over, and then there's one track that peels out into the yard. So I think there's 2 turnouts around here, and then the rest of the main line pretty much runs straight for about 18 feet. And yeah, about 18 feet until it then will start to bend back into another couple of turnouts on that far side. So hope you've enjoyed this one. Again, if you want to see more specifics about how I actually raise all this, go and look at the videos for the Seattle stations. I show some time lapse and stuff like that on putting all those in and raising them, but fairly straightforward, not a hard job, just a little bit time consuming, kind of the same as when I did the skyboards and the fascias. Not a hard job, just time consuming, and going to be a little bit slow and careful as you go through it all. But certainly looks the part now, and very excited to try and get some track running down, if nothing else, because it'll be fairly easy to wire in this track as well. There's not a whole lot of turnouts until I start actually doing the yard work itself. The main line should plow through pretty quickly, and then I've got really long section. I'd have well, 24 feet down here around the peninsula is probably another 8 feet, and then got 20 plus feet down through the stations and then around that return loop. So then we can really have some fun running trains. So please do like, subscribe, follow along, hit the notification bell so you can see when the new videos come out as I make a little bit more progress here. And we'll be back again soon. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.